in the big world of what's happening, maybe we could start a little bit on the bigger picture and the sovereignty. So you as a returning guest of ours, maybe you could start with what patterns of sovereignty struggles in Europe do you see repeating themselves today as compared to past centuries?
Well, I think it is in very many senses, it is a continuation of the quest for true sovereignty, which is being fought and engaged in on many levels and in many different regions. For a long time, during my adult years, and even before that, whilst I was in school, it seemed to be some kind of postmodernist end of history, where we were being taught and fed that we should have conquered all the major hurdles and challenges in history. The Nazis had been defeated and communism had fallen. So that's now the beginning of a wonderful period of peace and growth and stability. And of course, this is something which has always been a kind of framing, a lie even. And it has, in fact, been a continuation of the oligarchy, of the oligarchical powers, which never really ceased to give away their power, at least not deliberately and peacefully, of them to try and make sure that they keep a grip on the world, even so, on the whole world. So this issue of one world government is not something which is new. It has been there for a long time. It has been there centuries ago, and it's still continuing. And in this way, the idea of democracy is a very appealing one, and it is one which has been kind of accepted by at least most Europeans, all of Europe, but we haven't paid much attention on what the true quality or nature of this democracy really is. I'm speaking as a German, and I was shocked during my research, which I did with and for my project with Vera Sharaf, the title of which was Never Again is Now Global, to find out that the sovereignty of Germany is something that has been not much more than a myth, in the way that yes, there is the Federal Republic of Germany, and yes, it is a member of the United Nations, and they have been doing treaties of 2+4 after the fall of the Iron Curtain, and after unification. We were told that full sovereignty was restored on Germany, but at the same time, the German Supreme Court has kept on passing judgments that the German Reich never really went down. So what does this mean? It's hardly any matter of discussion in the German public, but of course it is of very grave importance to what's going on when you see things happening like the blowing up of Nord Stream, or the tapping of the phone of the German Chancellor by friendly powers, so-called friendly powers, and no one seems to care about it. Well, maybe the reason why nobody really makes a big fuss about it, is because they know, so they is the government in Berlin, know that there is something like a continuation of the statue of the Allied powers in Germany, which maybe supersede the sovereignty of the Federal Republic of Germany. This is just an hypothesis which I'm just expressing, but it is something which shows us that the idea of sovereignty certainly is not nearly as clear as we were being made to believe it was, and as we may hope it should be. So that's just one item, and then there are many others which pertain to the situation on the Balkans, even the very term Balkanization, which is a breaking up of stable entities of statehood, has been applied to the Balkans many times and has been going on and is tried to being applied to other parts of the world, and certainly the breaking up of the Soviet Union and the breaking up of Russia, and so the attacks on the integrity of, in this case, Russia, is something which needs to be really looked at. And in this way, you mentioned the genocide in the Ukraine, which is, of course, a very, very serious and troubling issue. But the origin of this conflict, of this hotbed of violence, as it is today. I mean, just a few days ago, we have had a situation where NATO has accused Russia of infringing Polish, so European NATO airspace. And this is a very serious business, but it has to do, it cannot be understood without a review of situations past, dating back to the 1990s and early 2000s, where Russia has made several attempts to make the West understand that what they pledged, in no uncertain terms, not to expand NATO any inch eastward, is something which has been violated and is infringing the Russian interests, and so therefore this is something which needs to be taken into consideration when assessing who has been perpetrating what kind of violation of international law. This is something which needs to be assessed on a very sober historical timeline, and this is not being done. So therefore, we are in a very problematic situation as far as I can see.
Thank you, Uwe. So in following that, explanation and really good big picture that you have shared to us, in the context of Ukraine and NATO expansion, who is truly willing and who is quietly resisting? And with that, do you see fractures emerging within the NATO itself, especially between Eastern and Western European states?
To be honest, I'm not that kind of a deep expert, and maybe Drago, if he should come on later, would be a person much more suited to answer this kind of question, because frankly, being a historian, I've taken a lot on my plate in terms of reassessing history, like Friedrich Schiller has taught us 250 years back when he spoke about in 1789 in his lecture at Jena University about what is and why do we need to study universal history, and in this lecture he really laid out that history is a process which is being shaped by men, but history is also something which needs to be understood by constantly going back and reassessing new incoming data and evidence to see what kind of effects are being exerted on previously seemingly crystal clear evidence of history. So this is something which needs to be permanent reassessment, and that's what I've tried to do. Also, currently, for example, I am working on a database connecting various people, various organizations, and various ideas over a longer time of history to understand issues such as what are the intentions of oligarchy versus republics, for example, or of what is the origin of the mind control operations which have been going on now for more than 100 years in a technical way, but it has been going on for ages in the mythological way of shaping people's perceptions by telling lies or half-truth or raising false flag operations and stuff. And this is all being done to manipulate public perception in a way that the need to gain support for certain initiatives of imperialist attacks on some other country, for example, it cannot go ahead without the support of the ordinary people, of the ordinary soldier who needs to go into the trenches. If everyone would resist this couldn't go on. So therefore, shaping of public perception, propaganda, as it has come to be termed in the 1920s, or maybe even before that, is something which is some of extreme importance in assessing what's going on. And sometimes it's not easy to really see through the fog, which is attempted to be cast outside of our own perceptions to muddy the water.
So that project of yours, gathering that data and seeing the connections, that's fantastic. Will you be sharing that data in the future, like publish it?
Yeah, of course. I intend to share it because I think it is helpful. I mean, this, for example, this started. I can show you one of the pieces which I've been trying to incorporate in this, and has to do with this book. And maybe the camera is not adjusted to show it the right way because it's inverted. But it is the book Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon by David McGowan. Laurel Canyon Covert Operations in the Dark Heart of the Hippie Dream. So this is focused on the idea of the counterculture movement, which apparently everyone thinks originated in San Francisco, right? So Scott McKenzie's song, "If You're Going to San Francisco," was sort of characteristic, we've been told, to the beginnings of this movement. But in fact, it has not been originated in San Francisco. It came from out of LA, from a place which has been very, very, very close to a secret army or military base, the Lookout Mountain Laboratories, which from all data which is available certainly had to do with shaping public perception, mind control, and feeding lies via film and movies and television to the general public, with the help of artists many of us have come to admire and come to be fans of. But I think we need to reassess our verdict on this, at least if we believe what David McGowan, the author who tragically passed due to lung cancer before COVID. So he's not longer with us, but this book is of exceptional value. I came across it while watching David Gosselin's wonderful video about the devil at Woodstock, which also is drawing upon David McGowan's work. And in fact, David Gosselin has dedicated his short production, The Devil at Woodstock, which you can find on his stack at The Age of Muses, dedicated it to David McGowan. So in this book, we get a lot of names which are really household names, but we get an understanding of those people, those organizations, Hollywood, being something of quite a different kind than what we have been thinking previously. So this is something which I then incorporate in this bigger picture of the connections of republicanism versus empire or imperialism, or the philosophical fight within Enlightenment, Leibniz versus Voltaire and Newton, for example, as just one item, which other people who had been doing the work before me, like Anton Chaikin, for example, have already worked a lot on. But my intention is to bring this together in a database which makes visible and not just readable these kind of connections and maybe how closely they are connected. And certainly I'm hoping to be able to present some of that soon.
That's a lot of work, but thanks a lot. It's truly very needed nowadays too. Especially there's so many information that's either half the truth or a lot are missing. So thank you for that. So in that regard, I was thinking, what's your thoughts, or in terms of how deep perhaps the leaders, I wouldn't say that the countries that are members or that are so-called in the coalition of the willing, how it could be just the leaders who are fully already been in that kind of mindset, indoctrinated by all of this for years, and either they are still not aware or they're fully aware that they are in that propaganda that they're used, and they fully believe that what they have been taught and heard or see is all about, how to really just control the whole world. So I was wondering if you could, because in the coalition of the willing, I remember the members are France, Great Britain, is Poland, Romania. How about Germany? Is Germany also in part of the coalition of the willing?
Well, Germany apparently is sitting on the fence, trying to make up their mind on whether to join this, like the Christian Democratic Union, so the major party of this coalition, surely wants, and the leader, of course, now the Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, who is very closely tied to interests like BlackRock and stuff. So therefore, it is quite obvious that he should be tending towards joining this effort, or made to join this effort by whatever means. But the other partner in the coalition is the Social Democratic Party, which has a different tendency. They too have their hawks inside them who are pressing to join, but they also have their dovish side, as does the CDU party, have parts of their members and executives are sort of ambiguous about this, because, I mean, even the very term coalition of the willing, we've heard this before, haven't we? I mean, I remember that the coalition of the willing was a term which was used to go against Saddam Hussein in the war following 9/11. And this is something which appeals to the morals of the public generally. I mean, we are being put under pressure to really get our act together and close the ranks to finally march against evil. What we should have understood by now, I mean, in the latest. One of the latest evidences was what happened in Iraq and the lie about weapons of mass destruction and the shaping of public perception. Was that how we've been lied to? But the same goes with Vietnam and all major military conflicts have been in one way or another distorted and made happen by lies being told to the public. So therefore, in all likelihood, we're being told another lie. And this should also be evident to those people who are now in government or who are now in parliament supporting the government. I can only hope that this kind of prudence and sobriety will kick in, because I mean, the attempts to drag Europe, NATO, into a military escalation is something which is also not unprecedented in history. Of course, NATO doesn't go back beyond 1948, but before that it was maybe mostly the same forces which were driving it, and NATO has been incepted by the British, by Winston Churchill's Iron Curtain speech, and this is all very strongly influenced by the oligarchy with their seat of power in the city of London and at Wall Street, and it's something which is very common and has been very common throughout history. So therefore, we should really be able to understand and do the math ourselves to understand that this is not in anyone's interest to go there and to be willing to keep the peace. False flag operations is one of the easiest way to blow up such a situation of peacekeeping, in inverted commas, by then forcing a public opinion, like it was shaped in World War I, where the sinking of the Lusitania was something which had been fabricated by intelligence and by forces who were set on getting the world to go to war with one another. And the same is very likely happening at this moment. So therefore, we should be very cautious in reverting to this kind of solution for peace in Ukraine.
I would like to mention what I said several times on the show, that Lord Ismay, the first NATO's General Secretary, he said that the NATO was established to keep the Americans in, the USA out, and the Germans under the pressure of all. And
the Russians out. The Russians
out, the Soviet Union out, and the Germans under control.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, we are facing this situation again because Patrick Barb, the German journalist, he said, made a very good statement. He said that Putin and Trump have agreed that the 300 billion, which are on Euroclear in Europe, shall be invested. It looks like that they shall be invested in USA. So that the 300 billion which were frozen in Europe, and all the governments thought that they could take this money, have nothing anymore. And it looks like that the European Union, and especially Germany, will accept Ukraine in a European circle, not a NATO, so that the Europeans, the European Union, has the task to finance the war and to reestablish Ukraine with the German or with the European tax funds. And so concerning the sovereignty of European Union and concerning the sovereignty of USA, we are only the pawns who are sacrificed again in front of either in the war with Russia or by the reconstruction of Ukraine again. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly the whole project of the European Union has been something which was designed to be a tool in a much bigger chess game. So it has never been about peace in Europe, like NATO never was designed as a as a force for peace, but as a force to help imperial powers reach their goals for world domination. And this is certainly there's certainly very good evidence for this in various instances throughout history by now. The question which I keep thinking about is, how do we get people who are ordinary folks, who are used to turn on the TV on prime time to receive the news as the truth, of what the world looks like? How do we get those people to understand that they are being fed anything but the truth? This is nothing to do about keeping people informed. It has to do about shaping people's perceptions, about stirring up emotions, and keeping the world divided and away from a cooperation of sovereign nations, right? And to be honest, I'm not really able to provide a very concise answer to this, other than that we need to really make an effort to educate people about issues of classical education, which is a precondition to come to sound conclusions for your own life and for your own actions as a citizen of a sovereign state, as a voter in elections. As long as this is not there, as long as it is so easy, like it has been, to create impressions of a black and white situation, and by this then make people act in a certain way which had been pre-designed to exactly follow those lines, we will not come to any betterment. So therefore, even though it may sound far-fetched or maybe even obscene to some to think about the concept of education and beauty and classical art as a means to educate people. This has been the same situation like Friedrich Schiller faced 250 years ago when he tried to make sense of the tragic events which unfolded during the French Revolution, and he understood that without aesthetical education, so without the means to get people to understand the various information and to assess the information which is in front of them, we will not be able to really get an informed and free society. So I'm sorry about this rather vague and evasive answer, but it is something which is just another reason for why I'm trying to connect those dots in historical evidence with the stressing of the importance of classical education, of virtues, and the need to what's the word, to surround ourselves with beauty, because that's a precondition to come to sound judgments for what is the right thing to do. And the right thing to do in a situation of crisis is never to follow your impulses. It's never to act on an instant where what you see is quite shocking. Yes, it may be shocking, but it is nothing to act in return in a similar impulsive and unreflected and unreasonable way.
Yeah, the situation is that the crisis is for, let's say, for the elite or for the people in the background, is a very good opportunity to transform the society from within. This also is the opportunity after a war to change the complete system within a society. For example, Ukraine. Zelensky said that Ukraine will become a state of smart cities. So Ukraine will become a prototype for the future. And the situation concerning education, what you said, is in values. The problem is the propaganda, because that governments or that politicians are corrupt. This is nothing new. This is something I think it's based in history already. The problem is that, for example, in the 70s or the 60s, we had very good journalists, and also in the 80s. The journalists who looked at the politicians very carefully, and if the politicians made something wrong, they were directly exposed. And if they made something wrong which was ethical, not correct, the career was collapsed. And the problem is that the propaganda today, the media, are completely in control of the government. So the point here is that the truth, as long as the truth is faster than the lie, then there is evolution. But in the moment where the lie is faster than the truth, then there is deprivation, or there is a digression. And we live in a time in which the governments try to slow the truth in order to hold the lie for a longer time.
Yeah, I mean, much of that is due to the technological progress which has been made over the past decades and centuries, which now makes information available in a much quicker way and much more immediate than it ever has been. And that's something which puts pressure on governments, but it is also something which needs to be assessed with caution, because sometimes those informations which are being shared on so-called alternative media are in the same way manipulated as the one which was a mainstream outlet of news, and this has to do with the research that has gone into ways of breaking up society, and psychological research is a major part in this, and in propaganda, for the most part, is psychological experimentation or psychological operations. So therefore, we have to be aware, and we have to find and develop ways to understand and make sense of what kind of information is in front of us. And that's, again, it's just another argument and just another plea to start shaping your judgment and shaping your own character by immersing yourself into classical education, into classical art, into beauty, to gradually evolve to a better quality of decision making in terms of making up your own mind and expressing your views in public. Even the views which we express on social media is designed to be impulsive rather than considerate and well thought and differentiated in terms of taking in more information. I mean, the space, the word count is limited, so therefore it's all made to act on impulses. It's all made to appeal to our senses, our immediate senses, rather than to enable us to make a better judgment of informed and reasonable decisions.
Yeah, there was the ex-KGB agent Yuri Bezmenov. He said the famous words, demoralization, destabilization, crisis, and normalization. And this goes on, or has started already in the 50s or 60s, especially also with Woodstock. This was a time when the demoralization, and for example, the family as unit, and this was all demoralized, and then by the destruction of the connection within families and also friendships, we have the destabilization. So we live in a time in which no one has really a leader. For example, there were several institutions who tried to find out, for example, in the Western world, who can the people trust, or in which do the people have trust? And the people don't have trust in any other people anymore. So in no other professions, in no leadership, they only have trust in their own job, what they do. And this is in my opinion, a horizontal war. For example, when people are fighting, in the moment when countries fighting from against each other, then a quarter will be destroyed, or a city will be destroyed, and all people, rich and poor, intellectual and stupid people, they lost their city, they lost their land, their houses. So they reunite in order to fight back, in order to get this area back, in order to live there again. And this is a commitment between the people. And we live in a horizontal war in which the poor people will get away very simple. And at first, we saw it, for example, during the pandemic time. The first shops which had to be closed were hairdressers and also physicians, because they were not allowed to make to do their jobs. So the situation is there is no commitment between the people; they only disappear, and then it goes level by level, and the middle class will disappear as well. And without commitment, there is no force. There is no real force which can fight against cruelty, in my opinion.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was still muted. It's a pleasure to be here. Of course, I apologize for being late. I have a bunch of stuff to do, especially these days. So it's and I'm really glad that I got the chance to be at least in the part of the program. So, Grace, could you please read the question that you sent me? That you wanted me to.
She said, in the context of Ukraine and NATO expansion, who is truly willing and who is quietly resisting? And do you see fractures emerging within NATO itself, especially between Eastern and Western European states? And of course, let me add this one, is that what's your thoughts? And this is for both you and, Uwe, whoever, on the reports of Russian drones by attacks at Polish borders. Is it a false flag or true? And what's your opinion and why it would happen? So thank you.
Right. So as I said before, I'm not really an analyst in current affairs. I'm observing as good as I can. But But so I would leave the analytical part of those first two questions to you, and I would just throw in my 2 cents for the last question about the alleged Russian drones in Polish airspace. So this certainly doesn't make any sense to me in terms of why would the Russians have an interest to do this, especially at this time in the global arena where Putin and Trump have met and seem to have reached at least some sort of understanding for a way forward, cautiously, but in some way they seem to have done this. So therefore, it would be completely senseless for the Russians. And then, from what I have heard or what I've been able to observe as to the nature of evidence, it is also quite, remarkable, to say the least, that such drones should be captured and then should be, as I've heard, they were been, handled with a hammer and stuff, and so this really doesn't seem to be proper. I mean, of course, it is something where the Russian side clearly will be observing as good as they can what's taking place on within the NATO countries, and the redeployment of troops and material and all this stuff, which is of grave concern, not only to the Russians. So therefore, they would certainly try to be ahead of the game or on top of the game as much as possible. But whether they would really go and resort to dropping bombs by way of drones at this point in time, and this to me looks very much like an orchestrated false flag event designed to impress the public opinion within the member states of NATO, especially the German population. So this is something where I try to do my utmost to make people in my immediate environment aware of the grave dangers which would certainly arise if we let ourselves be carried away and reconfirming our bias towards Russians bad, NATO good, Russians aggressor, NATO peacekeepers. This is something which is far too easy to my taste.
Well, I mean, I couldn't agree more. As Uwe said, this is most likely a false flag, and I just want to remind people, only 6 or 7 days before this alleged Russian drone strike, the former president Andrzej Duda actually said that he admitted that the Kiev regime has been trying to drag Poland into the war for since at least November 15, 2022. So that year, the village of Przewodów, which is pretty much a border village in eastern Poland, was hit by 2 air defense missiles that belonged to the S-300 system. The S-300 system is a Soviet era air defense system. And of course, the Ukrainians operate those because the vast majority of the Ukrainian military at the time was still composed of largely obsolete or modernized Soviet era equipment. So what the media were doing is they were pretty much lying about it. They were saying, or they were trying to use other means of whitewashing the Ukrainians and trying to blame it on the Russians. So what they would say is, you would see titles like Russian-made missiles hit Poland. So of course, Russian-made doesn't mean also Russian-owned, because a bunch of countries operate Russian-made weapons around the world. So that doesn't mean that Russia is conducting all operations that are used that involve Russian-made weapons. And of course, in the end, even if you read Wikipedia, it doesn't say Ukrainian missiles. It just says missiles. It's sort of like these mysterious missiles that came out of nowhere. And this is where we see how the mainstream propaganda machine operates, where they always try to present their own viewpoint that, well, oftentimes or most of the time is not corresponding to the truth. So, I mean, we have no reason to believe this is any different. And of course, for the Kiev regime, it's very important that they drag NATO directly into this conflict because they know they can't win it. The latest numbers are absolutely horrifying. 1.7 to 1.8 million Ukrainian soldiers are either dead or missing in action. And, if a person is missing in action for more than a year, or at least even a month, I mean, in such horrible conditions, Ukraine, you can already imagine that the person certainly didn't survive. Also, there are other things regarding the conflict. For instance, the Kiev regime often hides the fact that soldiers are killed because they don't have to pay anything to the families in case that the soldiers are missing. In addition, the local commanders are incentivized to hide this information because they can still receive the salaries of soldiers and then, keep them for themselves. So we see a conglomerate of corruption essentially in Ukraine that is sending hundreds of thousands of young men to certain death for no good reason, or any reason for that matter. And it's all about continuing the conflict for as long as possible, because obviously it's good for the military industrial complex in the West. The problem for Europe is that Europe has been largely deindustrialized, and the only industries that are still functional in the West, or at least functional on a mass scale, are weapons industries, or arms industries, if you want. So they have the interest to keep the war going. And of course, the Rheinmetall, the BEA Systems, the Lockheed Martin in America, or let's say Northrop Grumman or Raytheon and these other, or RTX as it's called now, all these corporations are raking enormous profits thanks to the war in Ukraine. And of course, they want to keep it going. And I mean, if there's a peace deal, then of course all this profit is not going to be there anymore. And of course, we can expect that they will try to present the so-called Russian threat as something viable. I mean, for people who don't know, there are 550 million people in the European Union. Russia has 150 million people, or let's say 160 million with the added territories. So the idea that Russia is going to invade Europe and take all of it is absolutely ridiculous. Russia has the military capability to destroy Europe or to destroy the world because it has 6,000 nuclear weapons. But that doesn't mean that Russia is going to invade and take Europe, because, I mean, what's the point of that? Even if all of Europe decides to surrender, how is Russia going to run this entire territory? It's an enormous territory and Russia simply doesn't have well, I'm not going to say the capability. I'm just going to say it doesn't have the political will to do that. People keep forgetting that Moscow decided to dismantle the USSR, which was a much bigger, I mean, it was about 30% bigger than Russia is today. So if they wanted more territory, they wouldn't have dismantled the USSR. It simply makes no sense that, this idea that Russia is an imperialist power that wants to expand in all directions. If they wanted to do that, they would have kept the territories they had. The thing is, Russia is simply doesn't want to allow NATO to expand close to its borders, where NATO can, place missiles and then try to blackmail Russia into doing whatever the hell NATO wants. I think this is the underlying cause of the entire conflict. Russia didn't want this conflict. Russia has been trying to negotiate with Europe, to negotiate with the United States. However, we know what happened. For instance, back in December 2021, when Lavrov asked Blinken, "Are you really going to support Ukraine's bid to acquire nuclear weapons?" Blinken said, "Oh, the Ukraine is a sovereign country, and it has the right to choose, what sort of weapons it's going to acquire." And of course, anyone with an ounce of brain would laugh at that, because we know that Ukraine is not a sovereign country. I wouldn't even call it Ukraine at this point. It's a Kiev neo-Nazi regime that is using the Ukrainian people as cannon fodder in a fight with Russia, and it's now threatening to push the entirety of Europe into a war with Russia. And I just want to remind people, various European countries have been trying to invade Russia for 800 years or even longer. It has never gone good. it has always ended in a disaster, and with the Russian military marching through the capitals of the said country that invaded Russia. And that was before Russia had 6,000 nuclear weapons. So I don't understand what sort of people or leaders, if we can even call them leaders, what sort of hope do they have to defeat Russia now that it has the largest nuclear arsenal on the planet? And it has had that arsenal for over 50 years, because it's been this massive since the 1970s, when the Soviet Union overtook the United States in the number of nuclear weapons it possesses. So the entire idea that Russia can be defeated militarily is absolutely ridiculous. I just want to point out, and this is something that many NATO officers have said, the Ukrainian military today would defeat, hands down, any European army, including the United Kingdom, including Germany, including France, in every aspect except the nuclear weapons. So the thing is, Ukrainians have a massive experience, and still, despite all that, the ratio of death for the Ukrainians is 1 to 13. So we have 13 Ukrainian soldiers dying for every Russian soldier. These are the data that were determined by relevant military sources. I have published several articles on this. People can find it on my Telegram channel. So very, very relevant sources. We're talking about the surgeons, the U.S. Society of Surgeons and Orthopedicians. We're talking about hack leaks. There were hacks of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense that listed 1.8 million soldiers who have died. And so far, the pro-Western media organizations in Russia have found evidence, undeniable evidence, for the death of over around 100 to 130,000 Russian soldiers. So that's an enormous discrepancy between the casualties on the Russian and the Ukrainian side. And this can be explained mathematically. Namely, 80% of soldiers died due to artillery. And this is one of the things that many people don't talk about. And even Zelensky himself admitted that the Russians have 10 times more artillery and about 30 times more airplanes. So what that means is it's mathematically impossible to claim that Russia is losing. Every ounce of scientific data that we have, every piece of scientific data that we have, suggests that the Ukrainians are really, really, taking a beating. And of course, if Europe thinks it can fight an army like that, because Russia right now, it has the deadliest armed force in the world. It has 3.5 years of battlefield experience in the most intensive combat the world has ever seen in the last 80 years. So if anyone thinks that Russia can lose a war under these circumstances, well, I wish them a lot of luck. They're going to need it.
The situation is that I also believe that this is a propaganda, because we have to, with respect to the drones in Poland, because we have to consider several things. There is a scientist in UK, David Betts is his name, and David Betts is a professor at the War Studies Department at the King's College in London. And he said that he thinks that the West European countries, especially in Great Britain and UK, there could be a civil war within the next 5 years. And so we have here the confrontation of inner conflicts. And the situation is, and this is also said by the journalist Patrick Barb, that if you see the order lists of the armies in order to increase now the militarization of the European countries, you don't see the equipment for a war against Russia. You see more the equipment for preparation of a civil war. So, if in the case that the drones were a propaganda situation, then they can increase the budget for militarization. They can increase the preparation for increasing the army. But at the same time, the orders for these armies is prepared for a civil war and not for a war against Russia. Yeah, so this is also very interesting to see. This is what I want to mention about that.
So let me just chime in there. I would agree in this way that certainly it is very troubling from a German perspective, in particular, the efforts which have been undertaken also in this country to build up the structure for control of the population, of the civil population, by technical means, using drones and other means for surveillance. This requires a tight-knit net of transmission for data. This has all been implemented over the past years in Germany. So therefore, I would also not rule out that this is something the governments or those who control governments, I would rather prefer to address our focus on the forces which are and have been behind governments for a long time, because those are the same ones who control the media, and therefore it is very easy to be in support of the government for the media and at this time, because it is a coincidence of interest there. So those the level of discontentment and the level of frustration and even protest in the population is at an all-time high. The level of acceptance for government politicians as for opposition politicians is low for the most part, with certain exceptions, but those are I won't go into at this time to make this point that this all indicates that they are taking into account the rise of civil disobedience and even acts of domestic violence, and this is something which we have to also be concerned about, apart from what is going on the international level with hostilities between countries. Certainly, the oligarchy is under great pressure because their business model and their way of modus operandi is clearly failing, has been failing for a long time, has always been propped up with certain operations which hijacked public opinion and made available large amounts of money by indebting whole peoples, so robbing national property and wealth, and this has come to an end, which is why they resort to things like pandemic preparedness and management, as well as UFO disclosure and alien threats looming on the horizon, which also would necessitate investment to stabilize and secure our societies. And so therefore, this is something which is not given the proper attention, in my view, and in this way I agree with what Hartmut said.
And we have also here in Europe the situation, for example, with France. Now, for example, we have this crisis, the political crisis in France, and this could also lead to an economical crisis. And France and Germany are economically very close partners, and this economical crisis from France can come to Germany as well. And then the two strongest economical countries in Europe would have economic crisis, which can lead to an economic crisis in the whole European Union. This is and at the moment, in my opinion, it looks like that we are the pawns for the Americans, for USA. The USA will benefit from Ukraine war. They will benefit from the connection to Russia, and we only have to pay. We have to pay higher gas. We have to pay the reconstruction of Ukraine. We have to pay the war for Ukraine. We have to pay also with our blood in Ukraine.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, what Hartmut said is the gist of it, essentially. Europe will once again be pushed into a war that's going to be orchestrated by the Anglo-Saxon elite, or the Anglo elite, whatever you want to call it, or the City of London, as some people call it. And the continental Europe is going to be destroyed. And this, again, will force Europe to become the vassal. I mean, it's essentially the revassalization of Europe to become a total vassal. And it's not even going to be an economic competitor anymore, because it's going to be destroyed. And once again, a new Marshall Plan will be necessary to simply, raise Europe from the ashes. But of course, Europe cannot recover from such a destruction, because Europe has not recovered from the 20th century, the bloodiest century in the history probably of the world, where the vast majority of the people were either killed or suffered some other misfortune that led to total economic devastation. And many countries in Eastern Europe haven't really recovered from this, because the Marshall Plan was never implemented in Eastern Europe. So in essence, this is something that's good only for the telesocratic entities that rule the so-called rules-based world order. So if somebody wants this, they really need to have some, interest to do that. I don't think anyone in Europe has the interest to do that. I mean, just look at the energy prices that have gone sky high in Europe. Before we had the Russian gas that was very easy to transport, very easy to store. It was pretty cheap. Now you have the American LNG, which has to be transported on special ships, and then transported on land on special vehicles, and then put in special storage. All of that makes it about 2 times more expensive than the Russian gas, maybe even 3 times. Hartmut knows pretty much about that. Of course, just please correct me if I'm wrong. But I recently read a study that says that the LNG actually pollutes the air 33% more than coal, and pollutes the environment, and 67% more than the regular pipeline gas. So it's more expensive. It affects the environment massively more. And also it destroys the economic competitiveness of European industries because they simply cannot, compete with much cheaper Chinese or Japanese or any other industrial powers. So, I mean, if somebody thinks this is good, and on top of that, you're going to have a war with Russia, well, I mean, again, really, I don't understand who these people are in Brussels who think that this is going to be good for Europe. Because even without nuclear weapons, Europe cannot defeat Russia. The Russians now have, as I said, the deadliest armed force in the world. Despite what the media are saying, if you go to the Pentagon sources, I mean actual Pentagon sources, what they're saying, and you can find, I mean it is a bit of a challenge, but you can find relevant sources even online, and you can also I had the honor and pleasure of talking to some people who are in the military, professionals. If you talk to them, you realize that what the media is saying is total nonsense. That makes no sense. Saying that the Russians have lost 1 million soldiers. Well, who killed them? If 80% of soldiers, as I mentioned, are dying due to artillery, which artillery killed them? Because the Ukrainians don't have it, obviously, or they don't have enough of it. And Mark Rutte, the general secretary of NATO, recently said that the Russians are producing 3 times more artillery shells than the entire Europe and America together. So that is completely unsustainable. And in any sort of a conflict in Europe between NATO and Russia, the casualties would be absolutely astronomical. And of course, the German military, the Bundeswehr, actually did studies and they realized they would have 600 to 1,200 soldiers dead every single day. And that's only due to artillery. So, the thing is, we oftentimes focus on drones because almost every drone has a camera, so you can see that how it kills a person. So this gives you sort of this observational bias that you think, the drones are probably the biggest killers. Well, they're not, because if every shell had a camera, nobody would be talking about drones. So the thing is, these wars like this are completely pointless. You can have the most well-equipped, the best trained soldier in the world, and the thing is, there are only 5%. There's only a 5% chance he will see the enemy soldier, because 80%, there's an 80% chance he's going to be killed by artillery from 50 kilometers away. So he's not going to be, whatever you did to the soldier in terms of training or equipment, it doesn't matter, because he's going to get killed by a $50 shell. So the whole point is, whoever is pushing for this, they want depopulation of Europe. They want bloodshed. And obviously, if you think about the fact that these people keep talking about the so-called golden billion and the need for depopulation, well, I mean, think about it. Do you really want these people to decide what your life is going to be if they don't want you to even be alive? I think that's the question of all questions.
Now Europe is at crossroads. So what would be a realistic path then towards sovereignty, like in the next decade, since all of you are from that part of the world? So I would like to hear your thoughts, Uwe, Drago, and Hartmut.
Let me add to this discussion again from the historical perspective, and also comment on Hartmut's and Drago's statements before. I'm not in any way of a different opinion, other than that I urge us all caution in drumming the oligarchical drums, in beating the oligarchical drums about American supremacy and Americans being behind this. It is very essential, in my view, and I've come to this conclusion through intense study of works of, for example, Anton Chaikin and others, who have convinced me that what is going on is a continuation of a struggle of Republican versus empire forces, and oligarchy is always in favor of empire and in favor of depopulation and in favor of deindustrialization. So with destroying Europe, with destroying Ukraine and Russia and everyone getting on their throats, they would be achieving what they intend to do. And if we also then help them in blaming America for this, which does have a very problematic political structure at the moment, but it has a constitution which is in many ways most advanced in terms of the balance of power and the Republican nature of it. Of course, it has been subverted via Wall Street and other influences inside the American community. But in essence, the American model, I would strongly argue, is still, at least in general, in principle, the way to go ahead. So to aim for sovereign nations which have the right and the interest to develop each other, to cooperate, and not take what has been happening in the American name over the last 100 years or so, since, or 120, since Teddy Roosevelt became president. That's basically when the imperialist America started, and it had been an internal struggle in America for much of the 20th century until the death of JFK and the rise of the Bushes and this whole group of oligarchs and friends of the empire, of the British Empire, in fact. So this is something which we should take into account, and should also perceive as a way forward by discovering the ideals and the ideas of what America was built upon and was it what it was meant to be, and that is something which I think has to be looked at with an unbiased way. Certainly, it has not everything is without or beyond criticism, but in general, the policy of Lincoln and others, Henry C. Carey, for example, has been a great influence on German rise to economic strength in the 1880s, which was a main reason for the British to push for war between Germany and Russia and France in World War One. So this is something which is in some ways may appear far-fetched and not relevant for today, but I do think it is very relevant.
I actually agree. I mean, when I say America, what I really mean is that the oligarchy that rules the country is using the Americans themselves as a tool, and the American people are not they're not evil, obviously, but the thing is, America is perfect for them because it can create this potential to become this telesocratic entity, sort of like a supercharged Britain. You see, Britain, as you know, is isolated from the rest of the continent, which allowed the UK and the City of London to project power and to push continental powers against each other and creating all sorts of wars. I mean, we can see that virtually every war, every major war since, let's say, the 7-Year War, has been orchestrated from the outside in one way or another. And it was mostly the City of London behind it, because that was the best way for the UK to, I mean, I mean, we can say England, but essentially it's still the City of London and the Empire. It was the best way to eliminate other imperial powers in Europe and to ensure they remain divided and that there's hatred that would allow England or the Great Britain to rule the seas and pretty much rule the rest of the world, which is why, of course, the British Empire was the largest in human history, even larger than even the Mongol Empire. So I think what they're trying to do now is they're trying to turn America into this supercharged version of England, where, of course, you have a massive continental country that has the resources to maintain power, not just, of course, in the Western Hemisphere, but also around the world, and project that power, and, of course, enable the oligarchy to control whether it's energy, whether it's the production capacity of other countries, and so on and so on. And I think this is the biggest problem. And many Americans have been led, or should I say misled, to believe that they're fighting for America while they are in Afghanistan or Iraq or let's say former Yugoslavia or anywhere else that they've been deployed, thinking that they're helping someone. But in essence, they're just helping the corporate interests and dying or getting maimed for life, while destroying the local population, which has always been the case in these so-called interventions, which is, of course, which is a ridiculous euphemism for actual aggression, armed aggression on sovereign countries. And we saw that, of course, in Iran as well, very recently. So I think the biggest issue is that the American people need to realize that they're being used or abused, if you want, as a tool of this oligarchic imperialism.
Hartmut, you have any thoughts to share?
Yeah, I have some thoughts to share. First of all, I want to make a point of view concerning the current situation. Because of the high gas prices in Europe, we have the SKW Stickstoffwerke Pistolitz. They have, which is a huge chemical company, which produced AdBlue with BASF and Yara together. So these are the three main producers of ammoniac, and also for AdBlue, because you need ammoniac for AdBlue. And this SKW Stickstoffwerke, they stopped or reduced the AdBlue production enormously, because of the high gas prices. So this means the prices for AdBlue increases very strong. And in the moment, BASF and Yara cannot produce it anymore because the gas prices are too high. In that moment, no truck will drive anymore. All diesel engines, modern diesel engines, which need AdBlue, cannot drive anymore. And then we have a real logistic problem in Europe. This is also a fact which nobody wants to see, really. So the situation is, if we want to establish sovereignty again in Europe, we have to fight against the propaganda first, because the propaganda divides us all. And by dividing, we will never find the strength to rise again. And with respect to the United States, in my opinion, they will become a technocratic state, so that the government will become obsolete, and that the big tech companies will take control over the cities with private police, private water supply, private infrastructure, etc. And I suppose that this is also something which is planned for Europe, because at the moment we have our politicians behave like they were not capable of managing the situation. And interestingly, we have Germany has got 1,000 billion of debt, and we have no money for the infrastructure of highways. We have no infrastructure of kindergarten. We have no money for the infrastructure of schools, but we can pay 9 billion annually to Ukraine. And this is something what we have to consider. And also Joschka Fischer, our foreign minister, or ex-foreign minister, he said that the Germans are very productive and have a lot of ideas, and this is the reason why Germans are so strong. So in order to weaken Germany, you have to give all the money away. It doesn't matter how, but you have to give all money away. So this would be the possibility to make something equal in the world. Yeah, and then you can see how the politicians, especially people from the Green Party, think. And as long as this kind of thinking is in the mindset of the politicians, there is no real hope. So the hope has to come from the people again.
I'm sorry, I have a hard stop approaching, but I would just like to remind all of us, and Hartmut, please forgive me, it's not a criticism in a personal way, but I would urge us to refrain from those kind of absolute statements about what will happen and what is going to happen and what will become, because ideas shape reality, and we need and we have all reason to retain optimism in terms of potential to change direction, to change course, and to understand way. Of course, it is something which requires maybe time, which of course is a precious resource. But then timelessness is an ancient and Chinese culture, or Eastern Asian culture, is something. Time is something which results from the presence of anger, fear, greed, or unawareness, and timelessness. So the conditions for good judgment and good decisions is the absence of those properties, which is something which can be trained and achieved by immersing ourselves in classical culture. So I would really like for all of us to keep an open mind and an optimistic mind. It is worth the effort, even though the challenges may be high and some hurdles may be powerful and difficult to overcome. But this is something where a mindset of optimism is very important.
Thank you so much, Uwe. Those are very important statements for us to hear, and I appreciate your time again. And we would like to really wish you the best for your project, because we would need to have that document in the near future. So take care, and do invite them again to your Substack. Never Again is now global, right? So follow him there. Oh, do you want to say a little bit about your radio? So you co-host someone during radio. So is that something that you want to invite others?
Well, yeah, it's a program in German, so therefore it is something where I put into practice those convictions about the necessity of classical culture, which has been driven out of public media almost completely, and a colleague and I, we are producing a small show about classical culture, classical art, poetry, music, and ideas, which I have learned from cooperating with Matt Arrett and Cynthia Chung of Rising Tide Foundations and many of their friends, and some of them I've mentioned earlier in this show. So this is something which is called Radio Ibicus, so Radio Ibicus, and it's produced once every month. And I hope to be expanding those efforts as well. But it's something which is a great joy to me, because focusing on those issues really opens the mind and provides perspective, because we're in a long run, we're in a marathon race rather than an immediate crisis. It may appear that things are in bad shape, but it is something which has been around for a long time. So therefore, let's keep our focus on what we can do going forward.
So you can find me on the BRICS information portal website, and also my Telegram channel is Serfan House. I mean, it's not too big. I just use it for a small community of followers, just to post my daily articles or programs like this one as well. So, and of course, I just want to say thank you to you, Grace, and to Uwe, and to Hartmut. Of course, it's always a pleasure to participate in these programs and just exchange ideas and opinions. And I agree with what Uwe said. It's important to keep optimism. It's important to understand what's really going on, but also to keep a level of optimism, because otherwise, what's the point of living?
So please remember to share, like, and subscribe, and do your thing. And there's always that glimmer of light somewhere. It's always with us. Okay, so stay tuned and stay curious and stay connected. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.